As many of you may or may not know, Mandy and I recently got married in Japan and have been living there ever since. We have been living in a small mountain community where I actually spent a lot of time growing up. I have been doing a lot of different types of work ranging from cutting down trees to repairing old beautiful cabins. Today I just wanted to make a video showing some of the work I was doing on one of the old cabins here. So the cabin I'm working on is on the very bottom middle screen right now. It's actually really cool because my brother's cabin is right above it, so I got to spend a lot of time with my brother, who's a local ski and mountain guide in Japan. So the main issue with this cabin was that it is built on a soft hillside where the ground is still moving downhill and the foundation was not adequate, so the whole building was leaning downhill. Just a lot of things needed to be repaired. Beams were rotten out, foundations were leaning the wrong direction. So we had a whole lot of work ahead of us. As you can see here, we propped the entire bottom half of the house up and got to work taking everything apart and then rebuilding a stronger foundation as well as supports for the cabin. One of the biggest challenges with this renovation was the remoteness of the cabin. The nearest road was 100 meters away with 2 flights of stairs that we needed to traverse with all of the materials. I really enjoyed this project because of the person I was working with. He was the son of the cabin owner, and he was a traditionally trained Japanese carpenter. So he was really smart with all the cool Japanese joinery. It was just a really cool work environment compared to the American construction environments which I've worked in the past. So the first thing we did was dig out the old foundation to see what we're working with. And as you can see here, the foundations are all independent. So the downhill side of the foundation was sinking faster than the rest of the house, causing the whole house to shift downhill. By using copious amounts of rebar and chemical anchors, we built a strong foundation connecting the front of the foundation to the rest of the cabin, and we plan to do this in the middle of the cabin as well as the far right side in order to build a strong foundation base that we can build the rest of the cabin on. After talking to several different specialists in the area, we decided on a kind of complex system, but it would make it so that if the ground ever does shift again in the future, we could easily put a jack in that gap between the end post and the rest of the house and jack up the cabin in order to make sure the cabin stays level. So this is what the end product looks like. We'll do this in the middle as well as the far side again. Just get a really strong and level foundation base. The other side of the cabin is now all jacked up, and it's time to remove the old supports. And these supports are not in good condition. You can see here they're almost falling off the foundation because the foundation's shifted, as well as they're just getting rotten and old.
I don't think I've ever dug this much dirt in my life, but the next one's ready to go in.
So the main thing we were doing here was not necessarily
There.
digging deeper, but we were building a more rigid and connected foundation system that was all tied together instead of independently isolated foundations.
Just gotta finish taking out that beam, take out that beam. It's all supported on these guys right now. But yeah, it's pretty deep. It's gonna be a fair amount of concrete in this one.
This is what it looks like with the wooden form on it, and you can also see some of the rebar work in there. We also added chamfered edges around the pillars because when concrete's at 90-degree angles, it likes to chip, so making them 45-degree angles instead prevents some chippage. All of the concrete that we're pouring, we mix in this small mixer right here, so it takes a fair amount of time. And we're using a 1:1:1 ratio of sand, gravel, and cement, so it's coming out with a really strong and dense concrete that's going to last a long time. Before we installed the new pillars, we used a combination of winches and jacks to straighten the house out and make sure that we had a straight and level cabin before we installed everything.
It's another beautiful day in the mountains of Japan. It's hard to get work done when the view looks like that, but we've got the foundation. It's getting there. We still got a couple more things we got to pour, but it's looking really good, and we just got all the lumber to do all the walls and stuff, so this house should be coming together pretty soon.
This big concrete wall that's fairly cracked and damaged really isn't serving much of a purpose. So we looked at it a bunch and realized it's not reinforced with rebar and it's more of a safety hazard and it adds more weight to the mountainside. So there's really no need for this wall to be here anymore. So we decided we were gonna take the concrete wall out and dig out all the dirt by hand and build a better system. In this clip, we can see the completed middle foundation, which came out great and level with all the other foundations. And now just looking at this again makes my back hurt, but you can see that we removed the concrete walls as well as all of the dirt from inside of the retaining wall. Oh man, that took a long time. We designed a new retaining wall and poured a nice big footing for it as well as installed all of the rebar to hold all the earth back. As I was working on the retaining wall, pretty good progress was made on the rest of the cabin. Walls started to go up and the floor joists were getting installed. As you can see here, it's quite the beefy retaining wall, but you really don't want to skimp out when it comes to retaining walls. We built a fairly beefy wooden form for the concrete to get put into, but we actually ended up having to reinforce this almost twice as much just because of how much weight the concrete had. We decided the best option was to do the pour all at once, so we knew it was going to be a really long day. In the middle here, you can see the drainage pipes, which we installed in order for the water to get from behind the retaining wall to the front. We carried down 80 bags of concrete, 80 bags of sand, and 80 bags of gravel, and got to work. The pour ended up taking us all day long, and we went into the early hours of the morning. And yeah, it was a crazy long and tiring endeavor, but we really had no other option due to the remoteness. We couldn't put in a concrete truck or put in a hose line for concrete. After about a week, the form was removed, and this is what the final product looked like. There were some cosmetic imperfections, but overall it is a great retaining wall, and the cosmetic things could be touched up later on. I really enjoyed working on this cabin and wish I could have stayed for the whole thing.
So it's been a blast working here these past couple weeks, but we are off to Australia for bigger and funner stuff.